Welcome to the deep dive. So I want you to picture this. It is 1982. You are sitting around a laminate table in a wood-paneled basement, character sheet in hand, polyhedral dice just scattered all across the table.
Oh, yeah, the classic vintage setup.
Exactly. And up until this point, the games you've been playing have been, well, chaotic, sprawling, unpredictable. You wander into a cave, you fight a goblin, you see what happens.
Right, very open-ended.
But then the person running the game drops a brand new 32-page booklet onto the table. It has this shiny gold bar across the top. And the moment they open it, the entire landscape of interactive storytelling changes forever.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift. We go from this world of pure, unguided imagination to something that feels almost like a directed cinematic experience.
It really does. So today we're doing a deep dive into a legendary release from 1982, the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Adventure module, Tomb of the Lizard King, or, as it's known by its product cut, I2. Yeah. And our mission today is to unpack how this single, wildly lethal game managed to balance storytelling, player agency, and just absolute mechanical cruelty.
And honestly, even if you have never rolled a 20-sided die in your life, you should care about this, because the DNA of this specific module is woven into, well, the video games you play and the media you consume today.
Right, it's everywhere now.
Exactly. We are looking at this incredible tension between freedom and structure. It is really the story of how a company transitioned from chaotic, hobbyist creativity into mass-market storytelling. And, the psychological tricks they use to genuinely terrify their audience.
Totally. But to really understand why this module felt like an alien artifact when it landed on tables in 1982, we kind of have to talk about what the tabletop landscape looked like before it arrived. Like, what was the standard experience back then?
Well, historians generally call the period from 1974 to 1981 the golden age of the game. And that era was heavily defined by the game's co-creator, Gary Gygax.
Okay, and what was his style?
His design philosophy was essentially this gonzo pulp fantasy sandbox environment. So if you look at famous modules from that era, like the Against the Giant series, they weren't really stories in the traditional sense.
What do you mean, like no plot at all?
Basically, yeah. They were massive, hostile geographic locations. The designer built a giant sandbox, filled it with monsters, and the narrative was entirely just whatever emergent chaotic things the players decided to do.
So it was just pure improvisation. You walk into a room, there is a giant, what do? There is no overarching plot telling you why you are fighting the giant.
Exactly. It's totally up to you.
But by 1982, things are really changing. The company behind the game, TSR, enters what is known as the Electrum Age. Gygax is losing direct creative control to the Bloom brothers, and the company is just exploding into a corporate mass-market entity.
Right, and that changes everything about how you make a product. Because when you are a boutique hobbyist publisher, you can rely on your hardcore players to improvise. But when you are trying to sell to a mass market, specifically to teenagers who have never played a role-playing game before, you need structure.
You can't just hand them a blank map and say, go.
Exactly. You need what they call fantastic realism and dramatic coherence. You have to guarantee that the product delivers a complete, satisfying experience right out of the box, regardless of who is actually running it.
And you can actually see this corporate shift physically printed on the product itself. Tomb of the Lizard King was the very first release to use this modernized, standardized trade dress.
Oh, the gold bar.
Yeah, it had this very official-looking gold bar across the top of the cover, which was trying to align it with their expensive premium hardcover rulebooks.
Wow.
And it featured the new slick logo with the dragon shaped like an ampersand.
But it wasn't just visual either. It was a profound semantic shift. Because for the first time, this wasn't marketed as a dungeon module. It was specifically branded as a fantasy adventure module.
Right, an adventure. But if the company's goal was to force players into this new cinematic structure, they had a major problem. How do you control a game master who is entirely used to improvising?
They had to invent a new tool to force the narrative. Which brings us to the introduction of boxed text.
Yes, the dreaded boxed text.
It's so ubiquitous now. Today, if you play a video game, you expect a cutscene. If you play a modern tabletop game, you expect the narrator to set the scene. But in 1982, this was revolutionary.
And very controversial.
Right, hugely. The module was filled with these pre-written descriptive paragraphs that the person running the game was supposed to read aloud verbatim to the players. And purists absolutely hated it. They called it railroady.
Because it takes away their control.
Right. They felt it wrestled control away from the table and forced everyone down a rigid, author-directed path.
It sounds like going from dropping you in an empty sandbox with some action figures and saying, make your own fun, to putting you on a tightly scripted theme park dark ride. You are still moving, you are still experiencing things, but you are very clearly on a track.
That is a perfect analogy. And from a corporate standpoint, that track was necessary. Structured storytelling guarantees a baseline of quality for less experienced groups.
Makes sense if you want to grow the audience.
Exactly. It was the vital evolutionary bridge that set the stage for the massive, heavy narrative franchises that would dominate the late 80s, things like Dragonlance and Ravenloft.
But if they are going to suddenly force players onto this new theme park ride, they needed a genuinely compelling story to justify taking away that freedom. They couldn't just throw you in a cave anymore.
No, they needed real stakes.
Right. And this is where Tomb of the Lizard King really swings for the fences. The story takes place in the County of Eor, along the River Ardo, which is ruled by Count John Brunus.
Which, by the way, was designed as a completely generic setting, so anyone could just drop it into their home game.
Oh, really? It wasn't part of a specific world?
Not initially. Though, as a quick aside for the lore enthusiasts out there, TSR later retconned this entire area into their official World of Greyhawk canon. They claimed the ruins of Eor were swallowed up by the Hool Marshes of Keoland.
Oh, that's a fun bit of trivia. But the way this module kicks off is incredibly cinematic for the era. It completely ignores the ultimate cliche of you all meet in a tavern.
Thank goodness.
Right. Instead, it starts in media res.
Yeah.
You are in the capital city of Vendor, in the middle of a formal diplomatic negotiation with the Count, when suddenly the court is violently ambushed by a demonic priest named Mordrin.
Bam. The stakes are immediately life or death.
Yeah, it forces engagement immediately. You aren't wandering around looking for the plot. The plot has literally just kicked the doors in and attacked you.
And the thing is, Mordrin is merely an agent for the true mastermind of the module, Sakatha.
The titular Lizard King. And Sakatha has this incredibly rich 250-year backstory. 2.5 centuries ago, he was a powerful Lizard King who stumbled upon a ring of wishes.
Such a dangerous item to give a villain.
Oh, totally. And here is where he breaks the mold. Instead of using literal magic wishes to just become a giant hulking brute, he chooses to augment his intellect. He wishes to become a 9th-level magic user?
Which is huge.
Right. But for anyone unfamiliar with the game's mechanics, what does that actually mean?
Well, it means he chooses reality-bending operating power over raw physical force. A standard Lizard King is basically just a large reptile with a trident. A 9th-level magic user is a highly educated, tactical genius who can manipulate the elements, turn invisible, and outsmart entire armies.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And with that intellect, and with the help of a 150-year-old black dragon ally named Olycus, Sakatha conquers the human populations and rules them as a slave caste.
But he doesn't stay in power, right?
No, because the narrative is deeply interested in the concept of hubris. His downfall 50 years later, during a human rebellion, isn't because he lacked power. It's because his narcissism blinded him.
Which leads to what I think is a massive logic hole in the story. So Sakatha is mortally wounded on the battlefield. He still has his ring of literal wishes. But instead of wishing to be fully healed or wishing for his enemies to drop dead, he makes this incredibly melodramatic dying wish.
He wishes to drink the blood of those who defeated him.
Yes, which accidentally resurrects him 2 centuries later as a vampire. I mean, I have to call a timeout here. He is dying on a battlefield. He is supposed to be a super genius magic user. And his final thought is, I want to drink their blood. That sounds like terrible amateurish decision-making.
I get that. On the surface, it absolutely looks like a plot contrivance.
Yeah.
But if we dig into classic villain psychology, it is actually a brilliant character flaw.
How?
Well, the module leans hard into the idea that ancient hubris and chaotic evil inevitably lead to self-destruction. Sakatha isn't a tragic victim making a mistake. He is driven by an ego so massive that simple survival wasn't enough for him.
He needed to dominate them.
Exactly. He sought permanent, predatory superiority over his enemies. He didn't just want to win the battle. He wanted to consume their bloodlines forever. His chaotic nature overrode his genius.
Okay, so Sakatha is like a chess grandmaster who is so obsessed with capturing a single pawn to humiliate his opponent that he willingly lets his own king get put into checkmate. The intellect was there, but the hubris completely blinded him.
Precisely. He weaponized his own ego and it backfired. But, even though he's a vampire now, Sakatha isn't just sitting patiently in a coffin waiting for you to show up. He's actively trying to destroy you from afar using mechanics that were incredibly punishing for the time.
Punishing is putting it mildly. If you open to the second page of this module, there is an explicit giant Sestape warning printed right in the text.
Literally telling you to halt.
Yes. It cautions the person running the game that this adventure is extremely hazardous and strongly recommends that players do not use their own beloved characters, but instead use the 9 pre-generated characters provided in the back.
They basically codified the meat grinder tournament style for home play.
They are literally telling you, we are probably going to kill you, please don't use a character you actually care about.
And a big reason for that lethality is Mark Akers, the designer, essentially inventing the concept of a hybrid monster. Today, games have established systems to combine creature types. But back then, Akers just manually mashed together the statistics for a lizard king, a vampire, and a 9th-level mage into one single monster.
That's insane. For the listener, a stat block is essentially a spreadsheet of a monster's vital stats, how hard they hit, how much health they have. Matching 3 of them together means Sakatha has brutal physical attacks from being a lizard king. He drains your actual life force like a vampire, and he casts high-level spells like a wizard.
It is a nightmare combination. Plus, he is actively scrying on the party the entire time.
Right. Scrying is basically magic surveillance. Sakatha is watching the players through a crystal ball. Think about the paranoia that creates at the table. You aren't the hunter exploring a dungeon, you are the hunted.
Exactly. The person running the game knows exactly what your plans are, and Sakatha uses that information to deploy his forces with relentless, intelligent tactics.
Like his dragon ally, Alicus. In most early games, a dragon just sat in a room waiting to be killed. But Alicus uses sophisticated hit-and-run guerrilla warfare.
Which was so rare then.
Yeah. He ambushes the party at geographic choke points, like bridges or the village of Wakeham, and then just flies away before he can be killed. It turns the game into a war of attrition.
It forces players to realize that the monsters want to win just as badly as they do. And it's not just combat either. When you finally reach the tomb, you encounter things like the River of Nothingness.
Oh, this puzzle is fascinating. The players experience this tactile hallucination where they think they are carefully pulling a raft across a subterranean river, but the river doesn't exist. It is an illusion hiding a massive, lethal pit of acid.
It is so devious.
Think about the last time a video game explicitly lied to you. It completely breaks your trust in the environment, right? You couldn't just swing a sword at it. You had to use logic and deduction to realize the environment itself was deceiving you.
It requires an entirely different skill set from the players. You have to rely on your own brain, not your character stats. But I will say, perhaps the most controversial mechanical choice in the entire module is the strict algorithmic level cap.
Oh man, yeah. The text explicitly forbids the game master from allowing any cleric character to be above 7th level. Period. And I really struggle with this design choice.
Why is that?
Well, if an 8th level cleric has earned the ability to easily destroy the hordes of undead monsters guarding the tomb, and the designer just slaps a no 8th level clerics allowed sign on the front door, isn't that just lazy gatekeeping? It feels like rewriting the laws of physics just so your haunted house works. Doesn't that punish the player for doing exactly what they're supposed to do, leveling up and getting stronger?
I completely understand why it feels like cheating. I really do. But I actually view it as a brilliant, if blunt, admission of the era's game design limitations. First edition AD&D had what we call wildly asymmetrical class scaling.
Meaning what, exactly, for someone who hasn't played?
Right, so in modern games, characters grow in power at roughly the same linear rate. Everyone gets slightly stronger at the same time. But in 1982, power was asymmetrical. The difference in power between a 7th level cleric and an 8th level cleric when fighting undead wasn't just a small bump, it was exponential.
Like a massive jump in ability.
Yes. The tomb is guarded by creatures called White's undead horrors that don't just deal damage, they permanently suck your life force away. To a 7th level cleric, a room full of Whites is a terrifying, lethal encounter. But the moment the cleric hits 8th level, they unlock an ability that instantly vaporizes Whites without even rolling a die.
Oh, wow. So a terrifying boss fight instantly becomes a walk in the park.
Precisely. An 8th level cleric would completely trivialize the Whites, removing all tension from the final act. So the level cap forces you to consider how game designers must mathematically balance tension. They knew that a single powerful ability could completely deflate a carefully authored horror narrative.
So they just lock them out.
Yeah, they had to physically barricade the narrative to protect the intended emotional experience.
Okay, when you frame it as protecting the emotional experience, the heavy-handedness makes a little more sense. You have to enforce the fear, otherwise the whole cinematic structure collapses.
Exactly.
But the contrast here is what really gets me. We have been talking about this module as this tightly structured, meticulously balanced masterpiece of mass-market horror. But the reality of how it was created behind the scenes is pure, unstructured chaos.
Well, the contrast is staggering. I mean, the designer, Mark Akers, wasn't even primarily a fantasy writer. He was best known for TSR's Prohibition-era crime game, Gangbusters.
And this entire module only exists because of a sudden scheduling panic. There was a gap in the production line for the intermediate series of adventures. Akers took it on as a freelance gig, separate from his day job.
Just trying to help out.
Right. He wrote this foundational text of structured tabletop storytelling over a single weekend, just panic typing furiously on a vintage Royal typewriter from Friday to Sunday so he could hand the manuscript in on Monday morning.
It's wild, and you can see the raw inspiration in that speed. He drew heavily from his childhood love of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which he read when he was 12. He needed a villain, so he mashed Dracula up with the reptilian monsters of early D&D because he felt he needed something scarier than a black dragon for the climax.
And before it was even published for retail, it was play-tested as a brutal, timed tournament module at the Origins 1980 convention. Players had a time limit to survive the tomb.
Talk about pressure.
Yeah, though weirdly, when they finally published it for the mass market 2 years later, they completely left out the tournament scoring matrices that the judges used to grade the players. They kept the pre-generated characters and the lethal difficulty, but just, forgot the scorecards.
That omission speaks volumes about the transitional state of the company. TSR was growing way too fast to coordinate properly. And you see that same awkward transition perfectly mirrored in the physical art department at the time. It is a fascinating clash of styles.
Oh, the art is a whole story on its own. It is like watching a teenager go through an awkward growth spurt. You have Harry J. Quinn doing the cover. His style was highly detailed, almost like classical portraiture, but it was incredibly stiff and lacked that kinetic, pulpy energy TSR would later be known for.
Right, very rigid.
And then inside the book, you have Jim Holloway providing these slightly humorous, almost comic strip style illustrations.
It creates this bizarre tonal whiplash. You are reading this terrifying Gothic text about a vampire lizard king, and then you see a slightly goofy cartoon of a monster.
It's so jarring.
And then you have a single piece of art by Jeff Easley that historians believe was literally an orphan sketch from the cutting room floor. They just slapped it in as an afterthought because they had a blank half page to fill.
But amongst all that chaos, you have David S. LaForce, known as Diesel, drafting the maps. And his clear, precise geometric mapping style was absolutely vital to making this module work.
It really was, because without those precise architectural maps, the module fails. The line-of-sight illusions and traps in the tomb, like the River of Nothingness, simply wouldn't function mathematically.
You have to know where everyone is standing.
Exactly. The game master needed to know exactly what a player could see from a specific 10-foot square. Diesel had to play architect to make the game mechanics function. The art direction as a whole is this vital evolutionary bridge between the amateurish hand-drawn zines of the 70s and the lush, oil-painted epics we would see by the late 80s.
And we can't talk about the chaotic production without mentioning the trivia. Because of a printing error using a sans serif font, the capital I in the product code looked exactly like a number 1.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So thousands of kids bought this thinking it was module number 12 and spent years wondering how they missed the first 11 parts of the story.
It is a collector's nightmare, but a historian's dream.
Plus, my absolute favorite detail of all. Mark Akers accidentally embedded some truly terrible lyric poetry that he wrote himself into an inn at the village of Waco.
Oh, the poetry is so bad.
It is so bad that even the fictional characters written into the adventure are explicitly described as hating it and wanting the bard to stop singing.
It is those deeply human, messy touches that survive the corporate standardization. Even the title itself, Tomb of the Lizard King. For decades, everyone assumed it was a deliberate homage to Jim Morrison of The Doors.
Right, the famous lyric, "I am the Lizard King, I can do anything."
Exactly the lyric people pointed to. But Akers confirmed later that while he was a fan, the connection was entirely a subconscious coincidence born of his sleep-deprived weekend writing marathon.
That's hilarious. So when we look back at Tomb of the Lizard King, we are looking at the perfect time capsule of 1982. It is a masterclass in hybrid villainy, punishing mechanics, and it represents that pivotal, controversial shift toward authored narrative experiences. It took the sprawling sandbox, fenced it in, and built a haunted house on top of it.
It really did.
Yeah.
And that transition leaves you with an important question to ponder, one that extends far beyond a laminate table and some dice. We have talked extensively today about the illusion of choice versus structured narrative.
Right.
In our modern, hyper-curated digital lives, algorithms now serve as our omnipresent dungeon masters. They feed you content, they guide your interactions, they build your daily narratives. Have you willingly traded the messy, unpredictable sandbox of your own emergent discoveries for a smooth, pre-written box text experience? Are you simply following the tracks laid out for you, completely unaware of the rails beneath your feet, just like players wandering blindly into Sakatha's swamp?